Yeah, so today we're going to be critiquing this video, video that's pretty much, I don't know, kind of an explanation of why black atheists are atheists, and it's by Capturing Christianity, aka Cameron Bertuzzi and Adam Coleman. So let's get into it.
Let's just kind of, take atheism as being that. Now, when you bring in what, many call black atheism, you have that component coupled with, or maybe you can say flavored by, the culture and concerns of people groups, i.e., people of the African diaspora, meaning African people of African descent here in the West, or even continental Africans. And so, for example, let's if you're talking about the moral argument, right? Typically, if somebody's dealing with, as far as the most common iteration of the moral argument, we're going to talk about that second premise. We're going to try to be give some warrant for it, and typically people will use examples like the Holocaust, for example, something that's like obviously wrong, to try to push those intuitions about there being such things as moral values and obligations. And they're going to use the Holocaust because, culturally speaking, it's something that's just understood as being, obviously problematic. Well, in the African American context, you would think of something like, slavery, particularly chattel slavery here in the West, as being an example of something that's obviously wrong, that would be attention grabbing in the same way that, the Holocaust might be for somebody else. And those are the kind of things that you see flavoring, if you will, atheism as it's, expressed in the African American context. There's a great concern for things like justice and, addressing some of the historical realities here in the West, particularly in regard to slavery, so on and so forth. And these things kind of coalesce into a stream of critique that black atheists tend to have against the church that really all flow from the problem of evil. Kind of taking a step back for a second, I recognize the issue of race tends to be politicized or maybe looked at as a social issue. But really, in terms of what we're talking about here, there's this philosophical underpinning, that I think is prominent in discussions that you may have with a black atheist. You really can't talk about the problem of evil and suffering in the African American context without at some point intersecting with the issue of racism and oppression, because the types of sufferings that are pronounced in the African American experience and history here in the West are tied together with racism and oppression at so many different points of history, and even in the present. And so when it comes to wrestling with the problem of evil and suffering and things of that nature, this is going to be something that is going to be most likely emerging in your conversations with black atheists one way or the other, and used as leverage against Christianity. So they may say things like, well, if God is real, well, let me take a step back for a second. When you think about like the problem of hiddenness, right? The notion that, God hasn't made himself apparent, right? Well, if you're dealing with a black atheist who's philosophically inclined, then that might be coupled with, where was Jesus during slavery? Why wasn't it the case that he made himself apparent, during, Jim Crow and so on and so forth, right? There's this kind of extra layer associated with, the history along with that philosophical problem. Or, just kind of your general thing about the inductive problem of evil. Where people's going to be saying, hey, there's no justification for the degree that we see evil here in America. And then you might have somebody in the African American context highlight that by, noting just the various points in the, of our history where there are these different atrocities and problems and so forth. And they're going to kind of leverage that in the same way that somebody might, use the inductive argument, to bring forth the problem of evil. So, it's a conflict between the history and, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it just sounds like they're adding more stuff when you're thinking in context of like the problem of evil. So they're adding in additional data, so to speak. So they're adding in facts about like the slavery and stuff like that,
Well, just viewing it through the lens of the human experience. I'm saying as it pertains to people of African descent in the West. So when you think about we talk about, I'm going to totally botch the guy's name, but Socialism and that kind of stuff. I mean, they're going to look at the problem of evil through the lens of, the evil that they see, the things that are in proximity to them. And likewise, you see the same thing in the African American context. It's just a different lens or context of experiences. And so you're going to have this stream of critique that really flows from that. They're going to say, hey, while it may be the case that the Black church was instrumental from a social, civic, political standpoint, even maybe a communal standpoint over the years, nevertheless, they're going to say that, the church is to be held wanting, or found, is found wanting, given that you have a number of professing Christians who participated in the slave trade and things of that nature. So they're going to try to leverage those kinds of things as like a moral critique against the church and Christianity. These are things that you would commonly see in those kinds of interactions. So, so that, and quite frankly, I think that's probably I would say that's the foremost stream of critique. The second one would be more akin to what you might find amongst your typical atheists, the notion that God just doesn't exist. And they're going to give several different arguments along those lines. But again, you're going to have like this added piece where it's this notion of it being like this kind of antiquated relic of African-American history that we just need to get rid of. It's been handicapping us this whole time, and we need to get rid of it because it's irrational. So they'll kind of layer on that piece as well.
Okay, Omari, you want to give your perspective on that first?
To be honest, I couldn't hear it.
Oh, you couldn't hear
it? No. Oh, wow. So I was hoping you were going to give your perspective first, and then I can relay my points.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know. Maybe we should get that figured out first, or because I don't know. I thought you were hearing everything I was hearing. So.
No.
Oh wow, that sucks. But you did watch the video earlier, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've got my notes here.
Okay. All right. So, in the beginning, I don't feel like he said too much that I disagreed with. He talked about how, basically, how Black atheists are, explaining the problem of evil. And so when they're explaining the problem of evil, they're going to be, kind of like throwing in things that they can relate to, or things that, are in their minds the worst things they can think of, like slavery and, even what's going on today with police brutality and things like that. It's just natural for people to view the world and interpret things from their own perspective. So I didn't really disagree with that much, but I do feel like he's kind of, in a way, implying that, to kind of use the problem of evil is it's not like as sophisticated as, maybe attacking it from a scriptural perspective. And, I agree with that, but just because somebody's using a more emotionally charged argument doesn't invalidate that argument, And I would also say that it's not just atheists who kind of like take the church to task, so to speak. You see a lot of Christians doing this. Like, I remember Tupac had a popular video that's viral now where he kind of gave his perspective on religion. And, he kind of said that if we weren't giving all of our money to churches, we'd have everything we need. He talked about how, you got these churches in New York that take up whole blocks, and you got homeless people outside. So I think that the critique of the Black church by Black people in general, it's been going on way before this new wave of Black atheism. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say on the issue.
Yeah, so for me, firstly, I don't agree with the term Black atheism. It suggests that Black atheists have their own version of atheism where they've grouped up together and they've made some ideas and they've put together a movement. And it just doesn't work like that. We're atheists who happen to be Black. And as we know with atheists, then we're not a monolith. We all have different views that have taken us towards atheism, and we all have different views towards religion. So the point that Adam makes about the problem of evil is slightly fair, But when it comes to people bringing up, oh, where was Jesus during slavery? Or where's Jesus during this police brutality? To be honest, I think that's one of the more simplistic arguments that you would hear from an atheist who happens to be black. When it comes to the problem of evil, for me, I would ask, why did God create Lucifer? If God is omnipotent and knew that Lucifer was to become Satan, then I don't see the reason why he would have created this individual in the beginning. Did God have to create Lucifer? No. So, as I said, I disagree with the term black atheism. Like, you can call me a black atheist on my own as an individual who has different views from different black atheists. But to group us together and to mischaracterize us and say that we, to generalize us and put forward that we would use an argument like, oh, where was Jesus during slavery? I don't think is quite fair, and I would consider it just a hasty generalization fallacy, rather than approaching us as individuals and asking us, why are you an atheist? This is exactly why they don't have any black atheists in this video, is giving their perspective, because it would not allow them to just put us all in a group and attack our views all as one, as if we're some form of monolith.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said as well. I mean, like I said, that is a very simplistic and I don't know, it's just what you'd call a very surface level argument, not very sophisticated at all. But, like I said, it's still, even though it's not very sophisticated, that's still a valid question. And it's the type of question I would have asked, when I was a teenager, those are the type of questions I asked as a teenager, because the problem of evil was definitely, one of the reasons I became an atheist. So I totally agree with you on that part, though, that the idea that atheists are primarily atheists because of the problem of evil and because we have an issue with white people, it's definitely, a bit of a caricature,
That's exactly it. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the rest of the video.
Try full screen it, see if that helps. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So what about the whole Christianity is a white man's religion? Does that play into it at all, or is that not really? Does that not really have much to do with black atheism?
Good question. So when it comes to
is that kind of unrelated?
I wouldn't say unrelated, but I would say somewhat less related than what you're going to see amongst some of the other groups that are unfortunately flourishing in the African American context today. So the reality is, and I'll give you the 30-second version, but the reality is, in addition to there being this heinous, subjugation of a people group, going back to the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, obviously you have the physical, bondage. But in addition to that, there's this identity disruption that occurs, beginning at the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, when you think about it, there's a context within which we all form a sense of identity, within our families, kinship networks, more broadly. In the African American context, it would have been like your clan, your nation, and so forth, your tribe or whatever. And what you have is a group of different people groups who didn't see themselves as being, monolithic or all one. But on the west coast of Africa, you have like the Fulani, the Ewe, the Yoruba, the Dahomey, all these different groups, and then they find themselves in this common predicament, and now they're just black. I'm saying, you have all these different identity concepts, and now you're black or Negro, and so in a sense, the African American community or communities of African descent here in the West are to a large extent kind of birthed out of that identity, birthed out of a common predicament of slavery and oppression and so forth. Now, fast forward, that being said, what you have today, I'm skipping over a lot of different things, but what you have today is people taking the idea that at that time we have this lost Africanness. There was these aspects to our identity that have been basically forcibly left behind, and what we need to do today is to regain that. We need to cast off anything that's considered to be European and basically take on what's considered to be indigenous or African. And Christianity is seen by many as being on the wrong side of that ledger. And so, they're casting off Christianity in the process. Now, there are some other groups like the Hebrew Israelites, Comedics, Moors, and maybe we can discuss them, for whom I think that's more pronounced, but you still will find that amongst Black atheists as well. As a matter of fact, you do have this, the use of the term Black atheism in a sort of idiosyncratic way, where they'll apply it to basically just rejecting the God of the Abrahamic faith. I'm saying they may be pantheists or whatever else, but in so much as they reject the God of the Abrahamic faith, they consider themselves to be Black atheists. And so again, I think that's just kind of an expression of casting off whatever is considered to be European and trying to regain what's considered to be African. That being said, in that vein, you do have this idea that there's some sort of Uncle Tomness to being, Black and being Christian. It's this notion that, being Black, being a Christian is out of step with one's ethnic heritage. Now, with that being said, Black atheists have less leverage to make that claim as opposed to, some other groups might, because atheism is so out of step with African history in general, and particularly the African community here in the West. There's a theologian by the name of John Mbiti who makes a statement that Africans are notoriously religious. There's just something about African culture. That's just it just is what it is, and that's carried over here in the West. Certainly that's carried over here in the West, and so atheism is really a cultural aberration, if you will. And so they've got less footing to be able to make the claim about Christianity being, some sort of betrayal of one's African roots, because atheism, actually, some people argue that atheism is really the white man's religion, as a matter of fact. So they don't really have a whole lot of leverage on that.
That's pretty good, actually. Atheism is the white man's religion.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on, but apparently you couldn't hear it. So in this particular part of the video, it's where he's talking about how atheism is referred to as the white man's religion, because Cameron asked him, what do you say to Black atheists who say that Christianity is the white man's religion? And so first, I would like to start off by saying that, I don't think that because something is written by a white person or introduced by a white person that it has no value, But at the same time, I don't feel like people who call Christianity a white religion are entirely incorrect. I think there's some, historical reality there. For example, one of the books that I recently purchased is called The Great Evil: Christianity, the Bible, and Native American Genocide. And it's written by a Native American man who has a PhD in Native American Studies. And he grew up on a reservation, so he was interacting with missionaries and stuff like that. And, he kind of starts the book out talking about the impact or the scale of the genocide. So just in the United States, this isn't counting indigenous people in the Caribbean or, like South America. This is just in the United States. Their population was reduced from 16 million to less than a quarter million. So, I don't know, I feel like it's almost arrogant to ask them to separate the religion from the oppressor, because genocide has multiple components, and he talks about that in the book. When a lot of people think about genocide, they just think about the act of killing people. They don't think about the imposition of religion and the cultural loss. So when people say the white man's religion, they're not necessarily saying, a white man. They're using that as a synonym for the oppressor's religion. So it's not even just Black people who view Christianity as a white religion. I'm pretty sure if you, just go around the world to India, where there was Christians in colonialism, or Africa, there's lots of people who will view Christianity as a white religion, and I don't think they're entirely unjustified in doing so. And then there's the cultural aspect of it, because the Roman Empire adopted Christianity, and for like 2,000 years, the Romans, or Rome, has controlled how people thought about Christianity, what they read, and more importantly, how the characters of the Bible are viewed. When you see images of Jesus, Moses, Adam and Eve, all the important figures of the Bible, they're all white. this is a question that I had myself as a kid, because when I had a Bible mentor and we'd be reading these books, I'll be like, how come there's no black people? Why are all the people white? So, there's that aspect of it too. And there's also, the role that Christianity has played in the identity of Europeans. I don't know if you know who Jesse Lee Peterson is, but he's he's a super conservative
that's amazing
black okay so you know who he is, like yeah, you know who he is. So he had Richard Spencer on his show, and I don't know if you know who Richard Spencer is, but okay, yeah, he considers himself, I think, a white nationalist,
alt-right leader, yeah.
He coined the term alt-right. So Jesse Lee Peterson had him on the show, and it's actually kind of funny because Jesse Lee Peterson was like, racism has never existed and it doesn't exist today. And it was kind of funny because Richard Spencer actually pushed back on him and said, I don't know if I would say racism has never existed. So that's bad when the white supremacist is telling you I wouldn't go that far. It's pretty bad. Yeah. But anyways, Jesse Lee Peterson asked him, was he a Christian? And he's like, no, I'm not a Christian. He considers himself a non-militant atheist. And so, but he said he views Christianity as a white religion, because he said he can't deny the role that it's played in European history and in his own identity. So black atheists to be honest, I don't even feel like it's the argument that black atheists use a lot. And that is one thing I respect Adam Coleman for, because he did say that this type of argument is more prominent among a comedic scientist. They're more likely to use this type of argument. And there's actually there's a battle rapper named B Dot.
I love B Dot.
Okay.
B Dot is that guy. Yeah. Okay. Now you're speaking my language.
So you saw B Dot's battle with the Christian rapper Loso then.
100%.
And he's kind of like using these basically the same type of arguments, and he's like, I'm trying to think of how he said it, he's like, basically, what did he say? I'm trying to think of the way he said it. He said something like, he left us for 400 years in a worthless condition, but he can't stop blacks from getting killed and getting jerked by the system. But y'all just go say, oh, don't go ham, B Dot. Oh, it hurts just to listen. And so that was kind of like, the arguments that Adam was talking about. He's appealing to the problem of evil, black people getting killed by cops, and he's talking about, slavery, and he's a comedic scientist. So I do respect Adam for, in this part of the video, not kind of like lumping us all into the same category. I don't know. I feel like I've taken up a lot of time, so I'll let you give your perspective on that.
Yeah, I agree with Adam. I don't hear this argument that much. This is the thing with this video that they've created. I feel like they didn't really look at much content from black atheists to find out the things that we are talking about, the arguments that we're putting forward. They just sort of thought, what have the ones that I've met spoken about, and then they've just jumbled that together and then put it in a video. And to be honest, it's exactly what you say. We can, there is some evidence to justify someone saying that Christianity is a white man's religion, especially when you contrast it with some of the traditional African religions, where the gods are black, the characters in the stories are black. And in Christianity, we don't see any of that. All of the characters are Hebrew. They're Israelite. They're fair skinned and dark skinned. The only time you really see Africans mentioned is when it comes to Egypt, and then they're the villains. So when people make comments like that, I wouldn't say it's the best way to argue against Christianity. But there is some rationale behind making that point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not an argument that I would ever use, but I'm not. I'm just, saying it's not a totally invalid point. And like I said with the Native Americans, I mean, I don't think any amount of, you know, you could give them all the philosophical books you want. It's not going to change the reality of what happened to them, at the hands of Christian colonizers. Okay, I think you might have frozen up. Oh shoot, now he can't hear me. Oh wow. Okay, can you hear me now? Huh. This is weird. This is embarrassing.
Yeah, the sound appears to be back on now.
Okay, that's good. That's pretty. I mean, that's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
But
It happened with
technical
their video as well,
difficulties.
didn't it?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to make sure the audio is on this time. So once we get to the next part, you can hear it. So I think we left off. We were talking about the characters of the Bible being primarily white, and even when they are kind of portrayed as not white, they're still, I think, far from what the original Hebrews would have looked like.
Mm.
So I think I'll move on to the next part of the video now. Hopefully you can hear it this time.
Fingers crossed.
But I do want to get your thoughts on, like, so what is your, like, I was about to say elephant pitch, elevator pitch. Like, how would you respond to someone who said that? And this is not a very sophisticated objection to Christianity, but what is your, like, response if someone were to say that Christianity is just a white man's religion, shouldn't take it seriously, should reject it?
Well, sure. Well, let me set it up by saying that, as you know, I'm a big, Plantinga fan. I know you are as well. And in reading his works, I came into contact with this. It's not to say that he's, coined this either, but the distinction between the de jure objection and or de jure objection and a de facto objection. Obviously, de facto, pertaining to Christianity being factually, wrong or something like that, one way or the other. De jure, while Plantinga will take that and say, well, this notion that Christianity is irrational, that he'll kind of tackle that as a de jure objection. Really, what you're dealing with this notion of Christianity being the white man's religion, that's another form of a de jure objection. You're not tackling whether or not it's true. You're saying that there's something else about it that is so detestable that we ought not to mess with it, basically. And so this idea of ethnic betrayal, I think, is kind of captured, in this notion of being of Christianity being the white man's religion. And so what I want to do is, provide evidence to the contrary. So typically what I'll do is I'll launch into the fact that there's 2,000 years, nearly 2,000 years of history when it comes to African Christianity, with at least 1,400 of that coming before the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, before you even get into the second century, you already have Christianity emerging in Egypt, and then you have it moving into North Africa. Dealing with Ethiopia is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, nation to declare itself Christian. You have ancient Nubia, which we would call Sudan today, was a Christian nation from about 450 AD to about about the 14th century. So there's about a Christian nation on the continent of Africa for about 1,000 years prior to the transatlantic slave trade. We also have documentation attesting to the fact that there was at least one or more Christian communities on the west coast of Africa over 100 years before the transatlantic slave trade. So that kind of kills the notion that somehow Black people only came into contact with Christianity during slavery or something like that. But even aside from that, if you look at here in the Western world, the fact of the matter is there is no worldview. There is no ideology that has been more of a potent force for the liberation of African people than Christianity. I've got a lecture on my YouTube page entitled The Image of God in the Black Experience, where I'm actually citing people like Frederick Douglass or J.W. Le Guin and a various number of other freedom fighters who explicitly are citing, the biblical text and, and concepts from the biblical worldview to make their case against slavery and, and against Jim Crow and things of that nature. So it's the idea that Christianity is the white man's religion is just, it's historically bankrupt, and then we can get into several figures of Christian history who played a pivotal role. As a matter of fact, I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. Tertullian, many people may not even know who that is, but it's an African theologian from the second or third century who actually coined the phrase the Trinity. He's credited for coining that word Trinity. It goes back to his works. He was considered to be the first theologian to write his works in Latin. And it's the word Trinitas is what he used to describe the Trinity. St. Augustine was North African, right? Based upon his mother's name, Monica, we can discern that she was likely from an indigenous African people group, and I could go on and on and on, but there are several key figures in church history far before the slave trade came into play that played pivotal roles in church history. And then further than that, I would get into some of the same philosophical arguments that we use with atheism in general. Now, I'm a big fan of David Baggett and Jerry Walls, and I have their book, Good God. And when I think about just the complex dynamic of our moral experience, they cover different aspects of, whether it be understanding something to be blameworthy or praiseworthy, understanding human value, the concept of moral reasoning, the foundations of moral values and obligations. And you have this network of different pieces to our moral experience. And you really can't make sense of the African-American experience without having a foundation and sound framework for the moral experience. And so when I think about a Harriet Tubman or MLK, for example, what would it mean for them to be significant historically if you take out the moral dynamic, right? The reason why these figures are significant in history is because they're morally significant, and what they did was morally significant. But if you don't have a sound foundation for morality, then you strip away some of you kind of rip out the heart of why somebody like a MLK is important from a historical standpoint. And so I typically will challenge, the atheists to kind of go tit for tat on that and really, show forth some sort of moral framework that can make sense of this African-American experience that they hold so dearly.
All right, I kind of got ahead of myself. I got to go back a little bit. So, all right, what did you think about that, if you could hear it this time?
Yeah, I could hear it clearly this time, thankfully. So,
okay.
Basically what Adam's doing is he's mischaracterizing the argument to make it easier for him to dismiss it. So when people say Christianity is the white man's religion, they don't mean that black people only came into contact with Christianity during slavery. They mean that Christianity originated from white people. It doesn't matter when white people introduced it to black people. It came from white people initially. So when he mentions the movement in Egypt, the movement in Ethiopia, it all started from missionaries from the Middle East who were either disciples of Jesus or disciples of Jesus, who then spread the word out of Christianity. So it's easy to say, oh yes, there were black Christians before slavery. We know that. That's not the argument that is being made when people say Christianity is the white man's religion. What is being said is that it started from white people. It has been spread to black people from white people, and there are black religions that we have dismissed in favor of this religion that has been brought to us through colonialism and other aspects of white supremacism.
Right, yeah, I would have to agree. And, he's mentioning a lot of African figures, but, I mean, even these people aren't what you would, consider black. And it's kind of funny because, when we talk about, like, the Comedics and some of the really Afrocentric people out there, the type of people who try to say that everybody was black, like the Chinese were black and the real original Native Americans were black, those types of people, they'll try to claim somebody like Hannibal as, a black person just because, Carthage, just because he was from Africa, they'll say like, oh, he was a black person. So, I mean, I guess geographically he has a bit of an argument that Christianity existed. But I mean, as you said, that's not the argument here. The argument is not that there were no people in Africa who were Christians before the transatlantic slave trade. The issue is what I brought up earlier. They're not saying that necessarily there weren't any people in Africa who were Christians. What they're saying is that the way that it was introduced to them was forcibly, and it was by, Europeans. So it's kind of like, I don't know, moving the goalpost a little bit.
100%, yeah.
And another thing that I forgot to talk about earlier when we were addressing the issue of whether Christianity is a white religion is the cultural exchange between, Christians and the European world, because very rarely is cultural exchange a one-way thing. It's usually two-way. And so just as Christianity influenced Europeans, Europeans influenced Christianity. Like there's a book called The Myth of Persecution, How Early Christians Invented the Story of Persecution. And it's the exact title is The Myth of Persecution, How Early Christians Invented the Story of Martyrdom. And what a lot of people don't know is that, the Greek narratives influenced the Christian narratives. For example, the good death is, it's one of those things that's really essential to the death of Jesus on the cross. And, he faces that like a Stoic. When Socrates was faced with death, he had the opportunity to escape. He had, I think one of his friends had basically said, okay, we got this ship set up, we can have you out of here tonight. But instead, he faces it, and essentially that's what Jesus does, He actually, Jesus has an easier way to get out than him because he's God, but he allows himself to be killed for his principles. And this is this type of death was, it was a reality in Greek literature, Greek and Roman literature, way before Christianity even existed. So, that's another aspect of, how Christianity is European in a way that it's not African or it's not Native American. So I'm not saying that Christianity is not a religion that's not for everybody. Actually, even in Richard Spencer's interview that he did with Jesse Lee Peterson, he said, I'm not saying that Christianity isn't for everybody or that anybody can't be a Christian. He's like, I'm just saying that this is an essentially like European religion, as it is today. Yeah,
I mean, who's one of the most prominent voices in Christianity? It's the Pope, who lives in the Vatican, in the center of Europe. I mean, it's clear for everybody to see that it's predominantly a European religion. I mean, the mischaracterization that Adam puts up is not what people are bringing up in their arguments at all.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself earlier, if the Pope is elected by God, and so like in 2,000 years he's never decided to elect somebody who wasn't white. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
There's a YouTuber who used to do Christian satire. His name was OG Furious. Okay. And he would address atheist arguments in a satirical way. And he's like, basically, people keep asking me like, why is all these people starving? Well, maybe God just don't like Africans, okay? And so, and that's, I mean, it's just hilarious. But yeah, I'm about to go to the next part of the video.
Cool.
Well, I mean, I say all the time, I think most people are poor historians and even worse philosophers, and I think that when it comes to that claim, if you say that Christianity is a white man's religion, then really what you're telling me is that you haven't done your homework. If you can't talk to me about Bishop Cyprian, Tertullian, Augustine, Athanasius, Origen, and I can go on down the line, then you're telling me you just haven't done your homework. You're just really making an unqualified claim at that point.
Okay, so this is pretty much the end of the portions that I put together that I thought were the most relevant to Black atheists. So I don't know. I guess you can give your take on that.
Yeah, so he brought up Frederick Douglass, and I think Frederick Douglass is a really important figure in the abolitionist movement and in working to get the rights of Black people in America. But one thing that Adam doesn't mention is how critical Frederick Douglass was of Christianity, despite being a Christian himself. So I found a quote, and it says here, from Frederick Douglass.
You might have frozen up again.
Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, you froze up for a little bit. So you were talking about Frederick Douglass and how he was critical of Christianity.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a quote from Frederick Douglass. Between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ and hate the partial and hypocritical Christianity of this land. So what that shows to me is that the type of Christianity that was prevalent across America whilst Frederick Douglass was growing up and living his life was a very toxic form of Christianity that he felt the need to critique it in order to liberate Black people. And I think that shows exactly why we're so critical of Christianity as well, because we're seeing the same issues come about from it. We're seeing the fact that people from the queer community can't feel liberated because there's a lot of people with homophobic and transphobic views that feel as though their views are mandated by the Bible. We're seeing that women are being treated as lesser than because we're seeing some verses from the Apostle Paul that tells them that they must be submissive and silent. So even someone who was of the faith was so critical, and that was necessary in helping Black people become more free. And I would say that's a clear indictment of Christianity of then and of today.
Right. Yeah, I would say that the fact that people were able to find inspiration and find moral principles in the Bible is not surprising at all, because it's not like it's not like Black people had a lot to read. It's not like they had these vast libraries. Like me, I have so many books, I can't read them in one lifetime. But if you have this one book, of course you're gonna mine it for what you can, for the best of what you can find. And even as an atheist, I find inspiration and it's not like my primary source of inspiration, but I'm capable of finding things that are valuable in it. Like my favorite I guess you could say, it's not a parable, but it's a teaching in the Bible, is the one where Jesus talks about how it's kind of like, it's almost like what you call xenia among the Greeks, kindness towards strangers. He talked about how, if we only love our friends, or we only love, the people who love us, then how are we different from non-Christians, And, as somebody who's traveled, been 20 countries, I've been at the mercy of strangers multiple times, and they've helped me when I got lost, and they've helped me when I missed my flight and got stranded. And so that's something I can really appreciate. But that doesn't mean that the Bible has a monopoly on kindness towards strangers, because as I said, the Greeks had that way before Christianity even existed. And I feel like what he's doing here is he's pretty much giving Christians a monopoly on morality and inspiration. And it's actually more like an accident of history. I mean, it could have been any other religion, just like when when the Christian apologist David Wood had his debate with Michael Shermer, David Wood was pretty much saying, without Christianity, we wouldn't have, the architecture we have, there would be no St. Peter's Basilica, we wouldn't have Michelangelo's works, and we wouldn't have all this stuff. And, Michael Shermer pointed out everybody was Christian. Who else was going to do it? Who else was going to do the science? Who else was going to do the artwork or the architecture? Everybody was Christian, and not being Christian could be a death sentence. So why would you be surprised that everything was done by Christians?
And one point on that is it's such a Eurocentric view. There's glorious architecture across Asia, across Africa. And the fact that he's bringing up Michelangelo and he's bringing up cathedrals, churches around Europe, it's just so narrow-minded. Like, just look at something like the Great Wall of China. That wasn't created by Christians, and that's a glorious piece of architecture. So, I mean, you've got to open your mind up. It's Christians haven't created everything. There's definitely plenty of non-Christians who've created some beautiful pieces of work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there is a lot of Eurocentrism among Christian apologists, especially when you talk about the problem of evil. Because, earlier I mentioned that book called The Great Evil by Chris Numpa. And, when I've made that parallel myself before, how in the Bible, when you read the Bible, there's a lot of genocide, and Christian apologists like William Lane Craig, they always, they use pretty much, there's like 5 main arguments they always use, and I'm actually doing a video on it, but one of the main ones is that those people were worshiping false gods, and that's pretty much the same type of argument that, colonizers used to justify killing Native Americans. And so there's definitely a Eurocentric component to it, because I feel like, like, for example, when it comes to the Persians, kind of like, attacking the Greeks, we always look at the Persians as evil, evil invaders, and even though the Spartans had slaves, we still look at them as the heroes because I think, at least in some part, because they're white.
Yeah.
So like when the Persians are essentially doing everything that basically the things that the Israelites did in the Bible, attacking a foreign nation and trying to take over, we view them as the bad guys, and we view the Spartans and the rest of the Greeks as the good guys. But then when the shoe's kind of on the other foot, and the Christians are attacking a nation of colored people, then it's kind of like, oh well, they were evil, so they deserved it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's the same way we hear that slavery in the Bible was for the greater good. They took over these nations and they taught them the ways of God. So that was justifiable because they were so sinful. It was fine for them to be slaves, and it just doesn't add up for me. Slavery is never an acceptable behavior.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an acceptable behavior for me, but that's also not, like where my atheism is anchored, so to speak. There's a lot of real world reasons that I don't believe in God or support the Bible, because like when I first became an atheist, as a teenager, like when I was around the age of 17, this is like 3 years after I'd already been an atheist, I wasn't a vocal atheist, and I still thought that religion was good for the world. I told myself, well, and this is actually an arrogant position because I felt like, well, I can handle not having a religion because I know right from wrong, and I can survive. I'm strong enough without needing a crutch. But I thought other people, they just can't handle it, so they need religion. And then, when I stopped having like kind of a less arrogant worldview, and I started thinking to myself, they can do what I can do. They can be moral without religion too. That's when, I really started to expand my perception on that. But, with when you look at, for example, what happened in India with, I don't know if you saw, well, you just went out.
I'm back. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see you though.
Oh, okay. Should we continue or should I come back out and go in?
Yeah. I guess we can continue like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was saying before I kind of started to ramble, I was going to say that there's lots of issues that religion causes in, the 21st century, like kind of like what you mentioned, like with homosexuals and women's rights and things like that. And even these people can find like inspiration in the Bible. Like, for example, there's a gay Christian named Matthew Vines, and he wrote a book called God and the Gay Christian. I read it a couple years ago, and I actually did a book review of it, kind of critiquing it, because I feel like Christians like that who are kind of trying to paint the Bible in a positive light, I feel like they actually do, in some ways, they do more harm than the conservative Christians, because they're making the Bible seem more liberal and progressive than it really is, But, my point is, like, even somebody who's gay can find inspiration and support from the Bible. That doesn't mean that it actually supports you. That just means you are able to find something that you feel inspired by or supported by, maybe because that's just your personal interpretation, or, I don't know.
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so my perspective when it comes to progressive Christians is I would say I'm more supportive than you, because not only are they less bigoted and more tolerant towards people who are different from them, but I can only see a positive trajectory for progressive Christians. The more progressive that Christianity gets, and the more that they see that certain texts are not acceptable, eventually it does lead to lack of belief in the faith. Whereas when it comes to conservative Christians, they're actively harming people's mental health by being so dismissive of large communities that are part of the population, and being discriminatory towards people who have different sexual identities. And their trajectory is not, it doesn't feel like there's any progress with it. Conservative Christians have a very stagnant worldview and ideology, and it's very difficult to change them. But with progressive Christians, I feel as though they're more accepting, and I can find a lot more things that I agree with them on.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand that perspective, but I feel like the long-term impact is negative, and let me explain to you what I mean. For example, like, let's say, when the Pope endorses same-sex unions, people look at the Pope as, like, even though he himself said that, he never said that his religious faith impacted his view on same-sex unions. This is entirely him, he himself, having this view outside of his religion. But, other people will view that as, religion being progressive, and they'll view that as religion, being supportive of same-sex unions. And I feel like that takes away from the people who are actually out there fighting for their rights. And, religion gets to take the credit. And, see, the thing with conservative Christians is, in a way, I kind of I don't want to say I like them, but I feel like they kind of allow people to see religion for what it really is. And the progressive Christians are actually what allows religion to keep adapting and surviving. You know, it's kind of funny because if you get on YouTube, you'll see lots of Christians attacking progressive Christianity. I'm sure you've seen some of the videos. And actually, Alan Parr and Alyssa Childers, they released a video a couple days ago where they talked about how progressive Christianity is worse than atheism, you know? And it's kind of funny because they don't realize that the progressive Christians are the ones that are keeping them afloat, you know? If all the Christians were conservative, you know, like people would be leaving much faster than they are now. You know, they'd be losing way more numbers than they are. And the thing with progressive Christianity is, yeah, you know, it might attract people who aren't into it for the intellectual aspect of it, but, you know, at least they believe, and there's a potential for them to become, you know, intellectually invested in it, you know. Whereas, you know, if they just leave and get turned off from it, then, you know, you just lost a potential Christian.
Yeah.
All right, so do you have anything else to add to that, or are you good?
Yeah, the main point I was going to add was if conservative Christians were no longer a large part of the population, I still feel that we'd be able to criticize Christianity by just using the holy book that they use itself. I mean, there's certain biblical verses that I don't think are, I would consider them indefensible. So if the entire population of Christianities were progressive, then I would say, well, be careful, because there are still these verses that are anti-women, anti-gay, and
Right.
and also triggering towards people who have been victims of sexual assault. The verse in the Bible that says, in the Old Testament, that says you can pay 150 shekels, I believe, if you attack a virgin, and then you have to marry her. And it's just like, you can't. There's no way to justify those verses. So that's something that we'll see in the future, because the progressive Christian group is growing quickly. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that affects society and how that affects the Christian relationship with the atheist community.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely growing, and you know, the conservatives, they see it. This is why they make so many videos about it. But I don't know, I still have mixed feelings about the progressive Christians. Like, of course, you know, these are more the type of people I'd have lunch with than, you know, somebody like what's a good example? You know, like the Joel Osteen type. You know, I'd be more likely to have dinner with him than, you know, somebody like Kenneth Copeland or
Is it
you know,
Childress?
somebody like that.
Childress is one of the words.
Childress.
Yeah.
Who's that?
He's a guy who's got a really high pitched voice, and he's very anti-gay. But yeah, I'll have to send you a video from him afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like one, I guess a good example of somebody you could say is like really embodies the worst of you know, fundamentalist Christianity is Pat Robertson.
Yeah.
Because I know when they were having the issue with the when there's like the big issue with the gay wedding cake.
Yeah.
Pat Robertson, he basically did a video. He said back in Jesus' time, we wouldn't have baked a cake for them. They would have been stoned to death. But, you know, we don't do that in this country. And it's kind of like he's like, oh, man, too bad we can't stone them. You know, it's like almost like he's upset that they can't stone gay people.
It's crazy. And Yeah, Christianity's trying its best to reform, but I feel eventually its origins will catch up with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you know, you're fortunate to live in the UK where like religion is really taking, you know, serious blows. You know, it's really dying out. And I mean, even though I mean it's still you know, the cultural history is still there, like the architecture and the artwork and all that stuff. But you know, as far as like belief, you know, people are like just not even going to church. You know, it's like really dying out, and I would love to see that in the United States. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why, you know, black atheists are really. I feel like now people are making an effort to, you know, like really keep a hold on black Christians because, you know, white people are leaving religion. You know, much more than we see in like black communities, and so once white people give up on religion, you know, the people who've been colonized and still hold on to religion, that's all they're going to have left, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why now, you know, they're really making a bid for the black believers.
Oh yeah, so I got his name wrong. It's Robert Jeffress. Does that ring a bell?
Robert Jeffress. I mean, nah, I've never heard of him.
Give him a Google afterwards, and I think you'll recognize him. But yeah, I think what will happen will be that eventually the numbers of white Christians are going to go down dramatically, and there will still be a lot of black Christians because that's just the way the trend seems to be going currently. And I feel as though when it comes to black Christians being the majority, that's likely to cause less influence on politics from Christians, because what we're seeing is it's the white evangelical movement that got someone like Trump in power, for instance. That movement was so prevalent, and they got him to speak at certain church functions, and that's what made the vote so large. I don't see black Christians having that same voting power. So it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamics as the numbers of white Christians drastically go down. And what I'd love to see Cameron Bertuzzi make is a video on black theism and black Christianity. If black atheism is a thing, then surely there must be the black theism version, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, I feel like they should, you know, maybe try to reach out to some black atheists like us and, you know, listen to what we really think about, you know, our world views and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation. And, you know, there's a book called The Religious Instruction of the Negroes. It's called something like that. And it's written by a man who was actually a slave owner named Charles Colcock Jones. And I think he owned like 3 plantations. And this book is a public domain book, so you can get on google.com/books and download it for free. And actually, I kind of want to reread that and maybe do a review on it. And I don't know, maybe if you decide to read it, we can talk about that together. So
sounds good. Is it How to Make a Negro Christian? Actually,
that's alternate title. You know, I think that's a more up-to-date title. But the original title is something like The Religious Instruction of the Negro in the United States or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely have a look. It would be good to do another video again.
Yeah. Actually, I read that a few years ago, but I want to like reread it. And another thing I'd like to do is have that guy Chris Numpa, the Native American guy. I would like to have him on here, you know, so he can talk about, because a lot of people, they don't know the role that Christianity played in the Native American genocide. So I'd like to have him on here at some point. You know, that would really kind of like let people see that black people aren't the only people who view like Christianity as a colonized religion or a white religion.
Yeah, that's a really good idea because
I've actually
then they'd have to make black atheism, Native American atheism,
yeah, yeah,
Asian atheism. Like they'd have to make loads of videos, and that would be great to see them fumbling the flag like that.
Yeah. There's actually in two of my previous podcasts, it was with atheists from India, and the last guy I talked to, we were talking about the British colonization of India, and how it resulted, how the famine resulted in 35 million people dead, and it was a preventable famine. And I asked him, I said, so do you feel like what they did to the Indian people had an impact on how they viewed Christianity? And he said, yes, of course, this is just natural, people view things, based on their experiences. And, this is a historical reality that you can't just like brush aside and say like, oh, well, if this person is calling Christianity a white religion, he hasn't done his homework,
Yeah.
It's not really that simple because you're almost disregarding that person's experience.
Very much agreed.
Yeah, I think it's about time to wrap it up because right now we're at hour and 6 minutes, and like once the files get so big, man, it's like they get clunky and hard to work with. So
yeah,
I'm gonna start trying to keep them like at an hour. So
okay.
But yeah, I was glad to have you on here. Enjoy the conversation, and it was just as good as I thought it would be. Minus the technical difficulties. So, but all right, man. Good talking to you.
Yeah, great speaking with you too. We'll catch up soon.
Yep.
Okay, take care.
You too.